Welcome to the IERLab Podcast. I'm your host, Walter Lee, and today we dive into the rising visibility of childhood in the spotlight of celebrity divorce. As Indonesian family structures become more diverse and more public, we explore how child influences from divorced households are reshaping long held norms, challenging the old ideal of the perfect nuclear family, and raising new questions like, does this visibility break stigma or quietly reinforce it? And for us to understand more, I am joined by Ariane Utomo, who wrote a piece titled Growing Up Online Through Divorce, Child Influences and Family Change in Indonesia. So, hello, Ariane.
Hi, Walter. Good morning from Melbourne.
Good morning from Seoul, South Korea. So, listen, we're going to get straight into it because I know you have a lot to talk about. So, when kids of divorced, high-profile families, or depending on whether they have celebrity status or not, become more visible online, does it actually help Indonesians accept different kinds of families? Like, I understand in many Asian countries still, there is this stigma of divorce, even in South Korea still, even though there is the divorce on the rise, but it's still somewhat stigmatized. Or does it, in your opinion, does it end up keeping the old divorce stigmas alive in Indonesia?
Hmm. So to begin with, I think it's important to start by saying that I'm not a child or family psychologist. I'm a social demographer,
Hmm.
and my work studies changing patterns in marriage and family in Indonesia and why and how they shift. So I use these insights to then link socioeconomic and political changes to family dynamics, not just in Indonesia, but also in the broader region of Southeast Asia and Asia. So it's so interesting that you mentioned South Korea, right?
Hmm.
Because I think the situation is pretty similar. We've been seeing rising divorce cases in the last 2 decades, but there's still prevailing stigmas
Hmm.
about being divorced or uh, 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 growing up in divorced family.
Right.
So yes, I like that, parallel that we could tease out right from the beginning of the podcast. But now going back to answer your question, it's a bit of both really. On the one hand, we're seeing increased visibility of children, particularly from high profile divorce celebrity families on social media platforms like Instagram, and such increased visibility in my article is argued to challenge the
Hmm.
portrayal of the perfect nuclear family that we had seen throughout the New Order era being heavily promoted by the government. So the Indonesian New Order era is from 1966. It
Hmm.
ended in 1998.
Hmm.
So in this article, I argue that because Instagram and other social media platforms have facilitated uh, this showcasing of more diverse family structures. Uh, these family and child influences have the potential to shape public attitudes and foster greater acceptance of family diversity.
Hmm.
But of course, as you said, in the case of South Korea, it's not always straightforward, right?
Right.
I actually did a recent study that conducted data from the World Value Survey for Indonesia in 2018. So it's a survey-based paper. And we found that actually in Indonesia, about half of the respondents still fully object to divorce. So this is relatively high and much higher than South Korea.
Hmm.
So therefore, there's a disconnect between what you see online on Instagram, this proliferation of diverse family forms being showcased, um, uh, the rising cases of divorce, and attitudes to divorce. Yeah, but that research showed that daily social media users do tend to have more permissive attitudes towards divorce compared to other people who don't use social media
Mm.
that often. So going back to your question, this could indicate that yes, greater exposure to diverse family structure through social media, people being exposed to divorced individuals or individuals and families going through divorce, on the one hand, might contribute to more accepting attitudes,
Mm.
but it really depends on what is being showcased, right? If you see a lot more representation of conflicts and adversity and challenges, then it could reinforce the stigma that you have mentioned earlier
Mm.
surrounding non-intact families and their children.
Well, that actually brings me to my next question. What happens to children when their parents break up? Becomes like sort of a public story on social media that the kid themselves, they never chose to share. And in many cases, I don't know. Well, I have never really seen cases of kids showing them going through the divorce, because when a divorce happens, it's not just between a mother and a father, or two spouses. It's also involving the kids if they're present.
Yeah. So from what I've observed in my work for this article is that the impact can vary significantly depending on a couple of things, right? First and foremost is, of course, the age of children when the divorce occurs. That plays a big role.
Hmm.
Some kids of the celebrity families might already have their own social media presence when the parents
Hmm.
were separated, but others might be too young
Hmm.
and but still they're featured prominently on their parents' accounts.
Hmm.
So it really depends on the age of the kids. And the second important factor is why and how the family separation take place, right? How the
Hmm.
parents themselves handle the situation
Right.
and how the separation is narrated online is super critical, right?
Hmm.
Um, um, uh, for example, if the divorce happened through highly conflictual process, then
Mm-hmm.
you see quite bitter custody battles. And
Hmm.
then you would see commenters speaking about the children as victims
Right.
um, of divorce, right? But again, it's not always negative. It really depends on how the divorce happened and actually how long since the divorce had occurred.
Yeah.
Because what we've seen is as time passes, as the conflict subside, we then see emergence of co-parenting strategies being
Hmm.
showcased online. So you
Hmm.
see children spending time across split households during religious holidays, uh, uh, or parents coming together for their child-centered events like school graduation and birthdays. So yeah, so there's a lot of like factors that drive varying depictions of how children navigate through divorce, of course, through this curated portrayal, right, on social media.
Hmm.
And what I thought was really interesting is that social media like Instagram is not just giving us a snapshot of the kids during divorce, but
Hmm.
in many cases, you see how the kids grew up following divorce.
Hmm.
And some celebrity children who then eventually grew up, become adult, growing up in non-intact families, they have used this increased visibility because of their parents' high-profile divorce cases
Hmm.
to then launch their own careers as
Right.
actors, musicians, politicians, and then they use this past event to craft their public personas of resilience, of how they were able to overcome adversity, like associated with family dissolution.
Mm.
But again, back to what you were saying in your question, I think, you know, for the minors, for the children, you know, online visibility isn't something that they choose, right?
Mm.
It's a complex situation that can potentially impact their emotional well-being,
Yeah.
their relationship with the parents,
Mm.
and I guess their own understanding of family dynamics. I'm not an expert on this, but I think the long-term effects of growing up with your family's private matters in the public eye are still very little understood. And I think it's an area that certainly deserve further research.
I definitely agree with you there. I personally don't take too much notice of the family dynamic, uh, let's say content creators, but
Mm,
there has been a few that I have uh, taken notice of, and they usually like to keep their children out of it. But this is also going on the Western side of social media, where
mm,
in there's so many family accounts in Korea as well, like raising their baby and using their
mm,
baby as sort of content, which is, you know,
mm,
completely up to them. If they want to do that, they're more than welcome. But when it comes down to the reality of things, that people aren't always happy behind the scenes, and sometimes it does lead to divorce. And like you mentioned before, co-parenting
mm,
as well is more important at that time than, I guess, the divorce itself. I think if you can co-parent very well and come to an agreement that, you know, you both love your child more than you hate your spouse or something,
yeah.
it might be sort of beneficial for them to understand. And like, yes, the age is important. Obviously, the older they get, the more they understand, and the more, you know, especially through puberty as well. Puberty and divorce, like during divorce, could be somewhat quite damaging depending on how the parents deal with that situation.
Mm,
Usually at a younger age, they don't quite understand, but they still get a little bit of a, you know, oh, why is mummy and daddy not living together? Why do I have to go here this day and here that day? But when it comes to the emotional factors behind it, it's a completely different thing from when a teenager with puberty or someone up to 19 years old understands. But I want to talk more a little bit about, like, if children's lives are curated online from, let's say, happy family to
mm,
divorce, or especially what is interesting, I don't know what it's like in Indonesia, but
mm.
remarriage.
Yep.
Does this only heighten viewers' interest, or does it affect the content negatively? For instance, if a divorce couple happens, do you see, like, sometimes, oh, viewers will take the wife's side or the husband's side, or like then this becomes this teen fighting between the viewers themselves.
Mm, mm. Well, definitely heightened engagement is, one thing. People become invested in the family stories, right?
Hmm.
Particularly followers who had followed the celebrity family from, uh, the couples falling in love, getting married, preparing for the first child, going through the happy family stage, and then through divorce, and then potentially into remarriage and blended family situation.
Hmm.
So yes, definitely, it drives viewers' interest and engagement. Does it affect the content negatively? Again, it really depends, and I think I've answered that with, previously.
Hmm.
You and it always changes, right? So it could be that the content drives quite negative sentiment at one point, but as time gets by, um, the narrative and the response of the followers could change, really
Hmm.
depending on what happens afterwards. What I found really interesting is that uh, there's this case study of a celebrity family that I included in my article. And this particular person, she's now a mega influencer herself,
Mm.
but her parents went through a very bitter divorce,
Mm.
but had since remarried, and now, they have like one big blended family with co-parents and such. And I think the shift in the ways in which their stories are being portrayed online are somewhat shaping public conversation about remarriage, about blended families, about step families. So, for example, when I grew up, when I was growing up in Indonesia back in the days, um, maybe also in South Korea, you see this, but stepmothers in particular and stepfathers
Mm.
tend to be depicted um, in popular culture negatively,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, the evil stepmother, or
Right.
the disengaged stepfather, and so on. What I saw in this family was they were actively using this phrase that is not stepmother or stepfather. In Bahasa Indonesia, it's ibu tiri or bapak tiri, but
Mm-hmm.
they use another term called like ibu sambung, bapak sambung. Sambung means, I'm not a very good, translator, but
Mm-hmm.
sambung means like connected or
Mm-hmm.
continuation, or linked. So it's changing even the language of what of how to address a step parent.
Oh.
Yeah, so rather than saying step or not biological,
Yeah.
they use a much more kind of like uh, I guess positive uh, name to
Yeah. So
address
it's not a
the.
negative sort of connotation to the like if you were called this, it wouldn't seem negative, right?
Yes. Mhm.
Ah, that's good because like I can imagine that like especially coming from like Asia specifically, I think, like Southeast Asia, Asia in general, and possibly even the Middle East
Mm.
as well. When it comes to, the step, like you said, even in Western culture, like if you think of like Cinderella, like the
Yes,
stepmother,
yes,
right? The
yes.
evil stepmother. The step, but then you do hear these really good stories about step families as well. Like I've got plenty of friends who have stepdads and they have
Mhm.
great relationships with them or
Yes.
stepmoms and great relationships with them. It's just in Asian society, we're a bit slow when it comes to accepting divorce, even still, like, even though it is happening, most of our parents are still together because this was just the way it was back then. They got married early, they had kids early, and they were expected to stay together. And if, regardless of how bad the relationship was. Now, my last question to you, and
Mhm.
it's sort of a repeat, but I do want to change it up a bit. Like, has there been much research into the step families, blended families? More importantly, I want to know single parent homes. Is that a
Mm.
common thing within Indonesia now, where it's a single parent where the spouse chooses just not to get married again? Especially with step families, is all those sort of factors, all those step families, blended families, single parent homes, it's how would you say, is it definitely less stigmatized these days?
Mm. Yeah, so I think, okay, so there's two parts to the question.
Mm.
Um, with regards to stigma, there has been quite a lot of research indicating that there is still a stigma attached to divorce, to single parent,
Mm.
particularly to single moms
Mm.
or divorced women. So stigma is gendered. Um, Most of that research comes out, sorry, most of those research are actually not coming from my own field, right?
Mm.
So, uh, um, I am, as I said before, I'm a social demographer.
Mm-hmm.
So in my discipline of population studies and demography, um, research on, step families, blended families, single families, it's relatively limited, but more importantly, the focus of the analysis is quite different. Demographers tend to look at aspects like the prevalence, the rate, the
Mm.
timing. How do these kind of say prevalence of divorce vary across different subgroups of the population or different regions? It's like macro trends.
Mm.
But however, I do see that there will be and there should be more interdisciplinary research in the future that looks closer at the questions that you're asking, right?
Mm.
What are the everyday manifestations and implications of family diversity in
Mm.
Indonesia? What does this mean for the individuals involved? And what does it mean for like policy,
Mm.
social policy? Um, I think, yeah, on the one hand, as I said earlier, there's been increased visibility of diverse family forms in Indonesia on social media and popular cultures. Um, this could potentially erode stigma. We're seeing more open discussions about step families, blended families, as you said, co-parenting. I
Mm.
think, these are all kind of indicative of a positive step for mainstreaming diverse family uh, structures.
Mm-hmm.
But that said, I guess it's important to return to the theme of the special issue where my article is situated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, you know, for the children growing up online through divorce
Mm.
comes with its own sets of risks and challenges.
Mm.
And I think parents, whether they're celebrities or not, need to be aware of these potential issues and consider how, their online practice
Mm-hmm.
might affect the children in the future.
Mm.
What are the steps that we need to take to kind of be more mindful of the privacy and well-being of the children.
Mm.
It's a really complex issue, but I think it's something that we need to continue thinking about and talking about as family structures continue to evolve
Mm-hmm.
online through Instagram, but
Yes.
also in practice, right? And we're seeing this not only just in Indonesia, but the broader region of Southeast Asia, East Asia. Family structures are becoming more complex with remarriage, single parenthood, blended families becoming a lot more visible and prevalent than before, as well as non-marriage. Yeah.
Exactly. I think also that's a very good point towards the end, non-marriage as well. There is, um, I don't know what it's like in Indonesia, but at the moment there is a very big, sort of, how can I say, phenomenon happening where people are
Mm,
choosing not to get married. It's not that,
mm,
they don't have anyone for them. Some people choose to be with somebody, but
mhm,
not to get married. And some people choose just to live alone
mm,
or like the marriage, there's evidence to say that it is steady, but it's not on
mhm,
the rise.
mm.
But for South Korea in particular, we have the one of the lowest birth rates in
Yes.
all the OECD countries, which is we have terrible firsts when it comes to statistics within OECD countries. But yes, for Indonesia as well, I'm sure there are very big similarities there. But Ariane, this has been a fantastic. I really wish we had a lot more time to talk because
Mhm.
it's been a fantastic talk with you today. But is there anything that you would like to promote, like your future studies or current works? I mean, there is always potential to have you back on the podcast. Is there anything that you'd like to promote at all?
Not at the moment, but I do wish to come back. Hopefully, there'll be opportunities for me to look into the rise of non-marriage
Yep.
in Indonesia. And you know what? I'm really interested in also looking at the associations between the very popular consumption. Well, the K-drama in Indonesia is so popular. A lot of Indonesians love K-drama, including myself.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting to kind of think about the ways in which marriage, family love is being uh, depicted on
Yes.
these drama, and kind of like think about how the disconnection between, as you said, demographic realities in South Korea, and kind of try to find ways to kind of think about demographic futures in the broader region, including Indonesia. But yeah, that's a topic for another podcast.
Yes, I definitely hope that I get to talk to you about that. You and I could, I think we might have to do 2 episodes on that because I could talk about that all day because I do keep an eye on what's happening in the K-drama world as well. But for our listeners today, thank you very much for listening to the IERLab podcast. Once again, thank you to our guest for today, Ariane Utomo.
Thank you so much.
And until next time, everybody, this has been Walter Lee. You may click on your next adventure.